All righty, I'm going to go ahead and get started with my introduction since we've got at least 20 people here. And thanks for joining us. This is our Jumpstart Germantown JUMPinar series, and we host these typically every other week, once in person and once virtual. This is obviously our Zoom version that the recording will be available afterwards. And we also have a bunch of other recordings of past JUMPinars that you can check out at jumpstartgermantown.com. I'll send out some links in the chat and provide more information about that at the end. But tonight we have two speakers from a returning organization. Michele, I'm not sure if you've ever spoken before, but you sponsored one of our previous events, and H&H did a JUMPinar virtually, had to be 3 years ago now, on demystifying the title process. And tonight we're talking a little bit, pretty much the same topic, but probably some updated information. And, I'm sure we'll have different individual questions about how to clear a title. And obviously, you need to use a title company for that. And the H&H Settlement Services is a local title company that a lot of Jumpstarters use, and that is, very familiar with the way Jumpstart loans are processed and get the closing. So we're really excited to have Nora Manini and Michele Rist, the Director of Business Development, here for a JUMPinar. And Michele, I'm going to let you share your screen and introduce yourselves a little bit in more detail. But thank you so much for being here, and thanks to everybody on the call. I will just say we're going to hold off on the questions until the end if possible. So those can be submitted using the Q&A tab on your Zoom toolbar there. So type those in, and I'll go through them as the session goes on, and then towards the end we'll have time to get through those with our speakers. So Michele and Nora, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to let you take it from here. If there's anything needed, just feel free to let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And you are able to see my screen correctly, Derek? Okay, so we'll get going. Yeah, thank you very much for having us. We are thrilled to be here. Just a little bit more about H&H Settlement Services. We are based in Glenside, right outside of the city limits. And we've been in business going on 11 years. We do everything from title insurance, settlements in both the residential and commercial space. We are also a corporate relocation expertise, and we do all this in the great state of Pennsylvania as well as New Jersey. And we look to exceed expectations and redefine what it means to have great service in everything that we do. So we are going to get started. Obviously today or this evening, we're going to talk about clearing title specific to the city of Philadelphia, because as many of you may know, if you've done business in and outside the city, Philadelphia has some nuances and some different rules, and it's just different. And so we want to touch base, since Jumpstart Germantown is in Philadelphia, how we, what it means to clear a title, why it's so important, especially when you're buying a property. And Derek and Nora and I were talking about this right before we started. And then to give you some best practices, just some tips on what makes sense and how to approach it. All right, Nora, take it away.
Okay, so hello, my name is Nora. I have been in the title business for 40 years, a little over 40 years. And 99% of my business has been in Philadelphia. So I am very familiar with the weirdness of Philadelphia. But we also are very aware of how important it is to clear titles. And our job is to protect the buyers and the lenders from future claims. A lot of people wonder what the difference between like a homeowner's insurance and a title insurance is. And I think the best way to try to explain that is homeowners insurance or property insurance insures you for things that could happen, possibly happen. Where title insurance, that gives you coverage for something that has already happened, but we may not know about it just yet. So just to give you a little idea of how the difference is in both homeowners and title insurance. Our goal is to prevent any legal disputes that may arise. And we also wanted to prevent delays in your closing. And a lot of times closings are delayed. And I think, Derek, we spoke about this a little bit, where you said, purchasing properties, the sellers will tell you, well, we can't make settlement in 30 days or, 60 days because we have title issues to clear up. So as buyers, and if a lot of you are investors, it's good to be proactive in trying to find as much information as possible on a property that you may be interested in purchasing. And our goal is to try to make the closing process very easy and seamless for you guys. And to prevent having a financial loss in what you invested. I think we can move on. So we want to discuss some common title issues. In Philadelphia, one of the big issues are City of Philadelphia liens. When I think of Philadelphia city liens, I know of some of the hidden liens where, the average buyer may think, well, the City of Philadelphia liens would be for, taxes. Well, water and sewer is lienable in Philadelphia. Gas is lienable in Philadelphia. And if it's a property that's not your standard single family residential property, there's what's called a rubbish bill. The city has decided to add an additional trash fee to properties that are maybe duplexes, triplexes, anything other than a single family. Other issues that may arise in Philadelphia are certain business districts. There's certain neighborhoods and areas in Philadelphia that are considered a business district, and they assess a fee or a tax that is a lienable item in Philadelphia. And so when we are doing a title search, we look to see if that particular property is located in one of those districts, and then we have to reach out to that district and find out if there's any outstanding fees for there. Other issues that arise are for estates, and I'm finding that to be very common nowadays because a lot of properties are properties that estates are selling. And some people, when they hear the word estate, they right away run from it. And it is not something to run from. It's easy to overcome probate and estate issues. Sheriff sales and tax sales. I know a lot of investors, they think, oh, let me go to the sheriff sale, let me purchase a property. We will not insure a property directly from the sheriff. You are purchasing these properties without title insurance, and they tell you you're buying these properties free and clear. And that is to an extent. One of the biggest problems that I see with investors buying at sheriff sales and tax sales is they don't do a title search before that second deposit is due. I believe when you purchase from a sheriff sale, you have to put an initial deposit, and then you have a couple weeks before you have to come in with that additional deposit to go through with the sale. During that time, I strongly suggest that you contact a title company and you get a title search, because there are issues that may arise when you go to sell that property. And an example of that is inheritance tax. At a tax sale and a sheriff sale, that is not addressed. So if the property is owned by a deceased person, we consider that coming out of an estate. And the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania says, well, we're entitled to inheritance tax. And your mortgage foreclosure attorneys are not going to deal with that inheritance tax, nor will the City of Philadelphia with a tax sale deal with it. So you will go to sell your property, and that's going to come up. And then they're going to say, well, you have to pay that inheritance tax on that property. So going forward, it's always good to know in advance that you're going to have that to deal with. I have one investor particularly that always comes to me, orders the title, goes ahead and purchases it. And while he's doing his development of the property, I'm working on contacting the state and resolving the inheritance tax issue. So when he goes to settlement, he's already dealt with that. And it's not an issue where they're going to hold money in escrow for him to proceed with the closing. So that is something that, they don't actively advertise, and it could be a sticker shock for you. So in Pennsylvania, you know, we say Philadelphia is a little weird. Well, so is Pennsylvania. Number one, Pennsylvania has an inheritance tax, and we're like one of the only states, I believe, across the country that has an inheritance tax, and it can be a costly tax to pay. We also have a requirement that child support needs to be paid, any back child support. So we also have to search with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to see if a buyer or a seller is responsible to pay back child support. If you're purchasing a property that is a condo or has like a homeowners association, you have to find out if there's any fees that are due to those associations, because they are lienable, and your lenders consider them, if they're not paid, they consider that a default in your mortgage. So that's something that you have to stay on top of. And mechanics liens. So mechanics liens are for work that was done on the property and has not been paid for. That contractor can go and file a mechanics lien. And so that's something that you need to have searched, which we do. And then we also have Pennsylvania tax liens. So that Pennsylvania tax lien, in Philadelphia, you have real estate taxes that are filed against the property. And you look at this and you say, well, so taxes aren't due after 20 years. That's not correct. Your taxes are always due. It's just that they have a certain amount of time that they can file a lien and collect on that lien. But real estate taxes, water and sewer, anything that's the municipality is more or less a silent lien and has to be paid whether they filed a lien in the different courts.
I think too, if I can jump in real quick and just make a comment, while we were preparing for this, and I think one of the reasons we added some of this duration of these liens is very often, I know not always, as an investor, you're looking at properties that maybe the owner is deceased and the property has sat there for 20 plus years. These are the type of things that can rear their ugly head, as Nora was explaining, as specific to the investor she works with, that you don't know. For example, child support liens are silent liens, so they are not found in the courthouse, but they're found in a system, the child support system that we have to go to. And so, you know, you may not know about that until you're knee deep into a property. Not that none of these can be overcome. There's always a solution, some in some shape or form, but it just kind of gives you an idea of how long these liens are valid and have to be addressed before you can, you know, get clear title, buy title insurance, and that sort of thing. Is that a fair statement, Nora?
It is. And when we talk about these silent liens, one of the things that a lot of people do when they're purchasing properties is they contact a search company or even a title agency, and they say, I just want a last owner search. And that's good to an extent, but that last owner search is not going to tell you about the child support. It's not going to tell you about homeowner assessment fees. It's not going to tell you about trash fees. It's not going to tell you about inheritance tax. It's a full title search that does that. And that's what we do when we're going to issue a title insurance policy. We're doing a full title search, not only on the current owner, but previous owners. And so and a lot of people do it because, number one, it's cheaper to do a last owner search, and it's faster. But sometimes, you know, you get what you pay for, and speed doesn't always mean accuracy. So when we do a title search and we come up with items that we feel need to be cleared in order for us to issue a title insurance policy, it could take time. You're counting on, number one, the city, the state to get back to you and tell you a payoff, or a release, and to get them to answer quickly is not always the case. So getting a title search early when you enter into an agreement of sale, once you get past your initial, deposits and, applying for your mortgage, it's always wise to get that title search ordered quickly, so that, or early on in the transaction, so that if we do come up with any of these issues, we have time to resolve them and overcome them. Sometimes obtaining a release or a satisfaction of a mortgage can take a lot of time, because when we reach out to a lender and say, hey, you have this mortgage here, the seller said they paid it in full, but it's still open of record, we need for you to do a release. They always tell us, well, we need time to do our research before we just go ahead and sign a release. So that takes time. We can also find in a title search that previous documents that were recorded with errors, missing someone signing. There might be an outstanding interest. So then you have to track these people down and get them to correct those errors that were in recording. And again, it takes time. Probate issues, you have to go and file with the county that the person died in to get the rights to handle the estate. And then if that property is not located in the same county that the person died in, you're filing in 2 counties. Again, you're looking at time. You have to make appointments to get to some of these offices and provide them with the necessary documents. And sometimes it takes time to get those documents. Some of you may have already heard about an action to quiet title, which sometimes comes up like in a dispute of ownership. And it can also come up with, if you can't locate someone that has a lien on the property, you can go to the courts and you can say to the courts, listen, we've done our due diligence to look for this person. We can't find them. We want you to go ahead and authorize the release or satisfaction of either the lien or ownership. That takes a lot of time, because you have to provide to the court that you did your due diligence in really finding this person. And anybody that needs to do that, I strongly suggest that you obtain counsel to do that, and obtain someone that has done that, because there's certain rules that need to be followed. And if you miss one of those steps, the court is not going to issue that action to quiet the title. And then you're starting all over again.
So I want to share a quick story, and Nora, I'm going to need your help on the details.
Okay.
But I know we talked about why is it important to clear title. And if you want to purchase a title policy as an owner, when you're purchasing a property, you're going to need to have clear title, or you're going to take exception and you're going to buy the property subject to an old mortgage or something like that, which we do not recommend at all. But just because someone has bought the property and obtained a title insurance policy and now is trying to sell the property doesn't mean that things in the past or in the chain of title doesn't rear its ugly head. We just recently had a property, the seller was trying to sell. We got the title order from the buyer, and there was a claim, I don't know, 100 years prior, and Nora, this is where I'll let you jump in, by a church, but the claim was in gold. It wasn't a dollar amount, it was in gold. So go ahead, Nora, tell that. It's very unique.
So what in this particular instance, what happened is the owner of the property signed the deed selling the property to a church, but not for a dollar amount. It was, like Michele said, in gold, and it was, able to be paid for like 100 years. It was really, I have never seen anything like it. And it just happened a couple months ago. So again, I've been doing this a very long time, and that was a first. But what happened is the current owner had a title insurance policy, and then they're selling, and another title company comes in and they do the search, and they see this issue. So the title company that already issued the title policy said, hey, we will reinsure this because we don't feel that this is a claim, or I don't want to use the word as claim. Because it's not a claim. Nobody is claiming anything, but there's a blemish on the title. But they feel that this blemish is never going to amount to anything. So they're willing to issue that title insurance. And in this particular case, the buyer, which you do have the right as a buyer, said, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this. I want it dealt with. So they come to us and they say, well, how do we deal with this? Well, you have to file an action to quiet the title. And I did a little bit of research and I saw that this particular church, and I use the word church in quotations, was doing this to other people. They were, I guess, saying, hey, to be part of this church or whatever, sign your property over to us. We're not going to give you any money. You pay us back over 100 years in gold. I don't even know how they would ever pay it back. So to me, it was just a way for this church to acquire title to property. But then the church was defunct. There was a criminal investigation against the church. The church is no longer in existence, but this blemish is still there. Even though it was 60 years old, it's still there. But we're willing to insure over that. But the buyer said, no, I don't want to do it. So now the seller is filing a claim with their title insurance company because they feel they don't have marketable title. And so the insurance company will probably end up filing that action to quiet the title.
And that could take 6 months, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
it could take, and so some of these issues can be fairly quickly, right? Again, it just depends on what you need, who's around, if there's research, but others can take a long time. But that one was kind of unique because the equivalent of gold in today's terms was like $1 million. And so I think that's what scared the buyer in that, wow, if I buy this property in this church, even though I'm getting a title insurance policy that says I have clear title, this church still could come back and, and it's $1 million claim. Chances are probably slim, but it could. But again, they walked away and moved on, but never a dull moment. So.
So another big issue is a deed fraud. So if somebody wants to go and record a deed, all they have to do is prepare a deed, have it signed, have it notarized, walk into the recorder's office, pay the necessary fees to record it, and the recorder records it. The recorder is not there to determine whether or not it's a valid deed. They're not there to determine if, the people that signed that deed were the correct people to sign it. And it's very, very common, especially in areas that are distressed, because people that are out there to steal titles are out there looking for properties that are vacant, abandoned, taxes are unpaid. They feel like, hey, there's nobody that's even going to know that we did this. And as investors, you're usually looking at those same type of properties because they're the properties that you can possibly get at a discounted rate. So deed fraud is very, very common, not only in Philadelphia, in all of the areas. Mortgage fraud, you say to yourself, what could mortgage fraud be as far as a title? So I will tell you a story on mortgage fraud. There was a property that had a mortgage on it, and the owners of the property prepared a satisfaction, signed the satisfaction, took it to the recorder's office and recorded it. So of course, when the title search is done and we see there was a mortgage that was taken out in, 2010, it's now satisfied, you move on. But that was a fraudulent satisfaction, and that's considered mortgage fraud. The seller still owed money on that property. And sure enough, after the closing, the buyers are getting notification that the property's going for sheriff's sale. So we've learned that when we're doing title searches, we're also looking at those mortgage satisfactions. We're looking to see, are there any key points here that may, steer you to think that this is a fraudulent satisfaction. And then we take it a step further and we say to the owner, listen, you need to prove how you paid this mortgage. We need proof that you paid it and when you paid it. So mortgage fraud doesn't necessarily mean, oh, you're applying for a mortgage and you're committing fraud by giving them false information. There's also mortgage fraud out there for current mortgages on properties. Foreclosure and sheriff sales scams. There's always scams out there that, you know, this is a foreclosed property, or we're in the process of foreclosing it, and we can get you, you know, a cheaper price for this property. Come with us, we'll sell it. Again, that's all part of deed fraud. Michele, if you want to touch on wire fraud.
Sure. So, you know, if you don't live, breathe, and eat real estate, you probably don't know a lot about wire fraud. You may hear about it, but you don't. But if you are a developer, if you're entitled, if you're a realtor, if you're a lender, that's all we hear. And they're always finding new ways to try to get into the transaction and steal the buyer's money or the seller's money in the transaction. We work with a company, and Nora and I both agreed we could talk hours about wire fraud and tell some horrific stories, but we work with a company and a technology platform that allows us to securely obtain and send wire instructions to the participants in a transaction. And they have been in business for a really long time. They work with the FBI. They help in trying to get back any monies that may be wired to the bad guys. But they came out with a report recently that, you know, 52% of consumers are not aware or are only somewhat aware of the risks of wire fraud as it pertains to a real estate transaction. So think about it. You're a buyer. You're going along, you're working with a realtor, a title company, and maybe a lender. And, you know, 2 weeks before settlement, you get an email from who you think is, you know, Michele at H&H Settlement saying, I need all your money now. You got to send it now. When all along, you know that you really don't need the money till we get to closer to closing. So those are the type of things that happen. So just be aware of it. If you are new to real estate, if you've not bought a property for your, you know, personally, first-time home buyers are always a good target for wire fraud and phishing scams when it comes to email, because a lot of times what these guys will do is they're able to break into the Gmail, the Yahoo accounts because they're not secure. And we're all talking, the title company, the lender, the buyer, the seller, the realtors, about the transaction, what's going on. And these guys have already broken into somebody's unsecured email. They're watching the process, and then they engage at the critical time, doing what I mentioned before, all this telling the buyer they need to send the wire instructions now, or sending stuff to us, the title company, asking, you know, changing wiring instructions to where the proceeds go or where maybe a mortgage payoff goes. And hence why we use this secure platform technology to keep that from happening. But
Just
really,
to step in there,
yeah.
I'm sorry. So certified is good for when we are wiring out. It doesn't protect you from wiring in. So if you're in a transaction as a buyer and they're asking you to wire your deposit money or your final settlement money, I cannot tell you to check and recheck enough. You know, don't say, oh, I'm going to call the number that's on that email that is asking me for the wire. Look up the company that you're making the closing with. If you're working with a realtor, ask your realtor for their contact person at that title company so that you can verify with someone those wiring instructions. There are so many buyers that have wired money to places that they thought was their title company or where they were making settlement, and it was not. And they
And we
lost
don't
their,
change our wire instructions, right? And
No.
that's usually what the message is, oh, I know we sent you wiring instructions to send money to Bank of America where our account is. We changed our account and now we're at Chase. That's not the case. I mean, we just don't do that.
when we send out our wiring instructions, we send them out and we leave the last 4 digits of our account number off. And we tell you that you have to contact us to verify those last 4 digits. So we feel that that is a way for the buyer to reach out to us and verify those wiring instructions.
So just be careful, slow down, take your time, especially when it comes to money. You know, if you're clearing title and you're working on buying a property you're going to develop or invest in, and then you get to the finish line and something happens where you're not wiring the money to the title company because you just weren't careful enough. You don't want that to happen for sure.
So vacant lots, so for some reason, we've had many claims involving vacant lots. So we as title agents are always raising our antennas when we get a application that involves a vacant lot. When you are purchasing vacant lots, I'd be very careful as to who you're dealing with. Before you give anybody any money on vacant lots. They seem to be something that, scammers are now concentrating on. So vacant lots, if you're going to buy them, just, again, have those antennas out. And fake listings, that's another common thing that's out there. And I think especially though, in like getting people to give them deposit monies and then never going through with the transaction.
So some best practices, and I know we've mentioned some of these before, but start early. If you're looking at a property, I know Nora mentioned the investor she works with on a regular basis who makes a deposit at a share of sale and then asks her to start research, ordering title so they can start working through anything that may be there. You don't have to wait that long. If you're looking at properties, make that investment in a title search. It's a couple $100. It could save you a lot of time, heartache, frustration, money, for, if you can eliminate quickly that, hey, this isn't a property that I'm willing to make an investment in because it needs a quiet title action, or the title is just a mess and it's just going to take months and months to clear this stuff up, or not. So start early. I cannot stress how important it is that you work with professionals, whether it is a lender, a real estate professional, or a title company, who not only know what they're doing in general, but specific to Philadelphia. I started this webinar talking about the nuances in Philadelphia. If you don't do a lot of business in Philadelphia like we do on a regular basis, you don't have the connections. You don't know the phone numbers to call. You've never seen this type of lien or that type of lien like Nora was mentioning, because you just don't do enough business in the city or other particular areas. So, and that applies to lenders, right? Lenders have the same issue that we may have as a title company. If they don't understand, then the process to get approved for a mortgage is longer because they're not sure. And an attorney and a real estate professional or an agent. So can't stress that as more. Work off referrals. We work with so many different people. We'd be glad to introduce you to a couple referrals and whatever you need, if you just ask. And then once you're in the transaction, communication is key. Whether it's, whether you have a clouded title or not, keeping everyone abreast. If there are title issues, we want to make sure everybody knows the expectations are there that, hey, our agreement of sale thought we could close in 45 days or 30 days. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that. Let's make an adjustment to the agreement of sale that way. Or like the example we were talking about with the church and the gold and the quiet title action, just making sure everyone is aware of what's going on is really important, and having transparency. So
I'd like to stress that something that's really important in Philadelphia, when it's not so much you need time to get a title search done, because we can get a title search done in, like 10 business days, but it's reaching out and contacting these other departments of Philadelphia, like the water department. The water department doesn't have to file a lien, so we have to reach out to the water department and say, hey, can you tell us how much is owed on this property? And sometimes that can take a month for them to get back to us, because they have to send it to like the law department, and the law department, they take their time in doing their research and getting the information back to you. Same with PGW. Like, we have to reach out to PGW. That's not something that shows up on the title search. So when you talk about someone that's familiar with the area, these are the reasons you need someone familiar. I've had other title agencies in other areas reach out to me and say, hey, I have this transaction that was referred to us. It's Philadelphia. We can do the title search, but we don't know what to do after that. We'd be willing to give you the deal. Or can you help us out? Because there are so many different aspects of searching things in Philadelphia. So guess what? If you take me out of Philadelphia or the little surrounding areas, I'm not sure that I know exactly what has to be done either, because I don't work in those areas.
Right. So a little bit, I guess, about us, and then we'll get into the Q&A. But again, we talked about H&H, who we are, what we do. We have an incredible team that has so much experience. We use a little bit of technology. We're very client focused. And we don't like to say it can't be done. We are problem solvers. We want to find a way to get things done. There always is a way to get things done. And we have a lot of Philly pride, because again, our team, most of our team has been born, raised, and have spent most of their career in Philadelphia and the surrounding area. So we not only know Philly, we know the 5-county area really well, and would love the opportunity to help you with any of your next transactions. One of the things I didn't put here, but if you the QR code that we have here at the end, I'll show you, is takes you to our website, which has just numerous resources and guides that you can use and download, whether it talks about what is title insurance or what happens at a sheriff's sale. There's a title calculator, so you can do a quote based on where the property is located, whether that is Philadelphia or one of the other 4 counties, surrounding counties. It'll give you transfer tax, because obviously transfer tax in the city of Philadelphia is a lot different than the outlying counties. And you can download those, and you can order title from there as well. So and when you have a second, it's worth checking it out and going to resources on our website to see what's there. And I think that's it, Derek.
Great. Thank you so much. That was excellent and perfect on timing. That way we have a little bit of a room for Q&A here. I appreciate you leaving that. So with that said, everybody on the call, feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A tab. I do have a couple questions, but first I just wanted to say, obviously, thank you for sharing your knowledge and everything, but I want to encourage people on the call to utilize organizations like H&H as a member of your development team, and having professional, extremely efficient and hardworking people in those different categories of your project can really help you have a competitive advantage. Nora, you shared that story about the one developer who would be working on the renovation while you're working on the title issues simultaneously. Yep. And not even being sure about whether it's going to be cleared by closing, but they have confidence that you're going to do everything you can to make that happen. So that developer is taking on projects that others are too scared to, right? Or may have been sitting there Yeah,
Yes.
right. So similar to, I think during our training program, Ken mentions how he has a really good environmental consultant, and he's not scared to walk away, or he's not scared to walk towards those projects that have those multiple, environmental reviews that you need to do with all the remediation and everything. So it can really help you. So I just want to encourage people to save those business cards and have a good big list of people who they've heard from Jumpstart, heard about through Jumpstart, and help them complete their project. So just wanted to say that piece and thank you both. And one question I did have, let me pull it up here. It was about mechanics liens. So before we got on the call, we were talking about the issues with contractors that every developer encounters on a project. And we haven't heard about it too much, but I am curious about how the mechanic lien process works, like, and where the developer is going to encounter that. Say you have a jumpstart loan for a renovation that's going to take 1 year, and in month 3 of that project, your contractor, and you get into a large dispute, and they file a mechanics lien against you. Will that impact your ability to, like, do you have to clear that, or before selling it and having somebody else get title insurance, or like where does that, where do you know anything about the litigation of that and how that might impact the project?
Well, yes. I mean, a mechanics lien can only be filed if the contractor is owed money, but he had to have completed the work and you just didn't pay him. But anybody can go down and file a lien. And then you have to go and defend it in court. But anybody can walk into, the municipality or county and pathonetary's office and file a proceeding. And then it's up to you to defend it. But a mechanics lien can only be filed if the contractor is owed money for work that has been completed.
Gotcha.
And the time frame, Nora, right? It's I mean, it can go backwards if as far as the lien, right?
It reverts back to the date of completion. That's why the work has to be completed. The contractor can't say, well, he owes me for work, but I'm not finished. The work has to be completed. And that's why a lot of times when you get into like new construction, before the lender will give money to start the construction, to end the construction, like to do the final purchase, they want to see that there's no mechanics, liens out there filed.
Got it. And then my next question was just about, I guess, title expenses in general. So I know it is standardized. What can people expect to pay, on that upfront purchase of a property before developing it?
Well, title insurance and Pennsylvania, first of all, we're an all-inclusive state. So a lot of fees that you may see outside of Pennsylvania, you will not see in PA. So in your title insurance premium, your title search is paid for. So if you were that investor that came to us ahead of time and said, hey, I want you guys to do a title search, we're going to collect the fee for the title search because obviously we're doing that work. But if you were to purchase title insurance on that property, at the time of your settlement, we would credit you that title search fee because that is included in your title premium. And then there are other fees that would be due pertaining to the loan. And it would be, particulars as to the loan. Their lenders ask for certain endorsements that we have to charge for. But on our website, there is a rate calculator, and that will give you a general idea of our fees and the title premiums.
And good to know, Derek, too, is in Pennsylvania, title premiums are regulated. So yes. H&H's premium on a $200,000 purchase and title insurance for an owner is based on the purchase price of the property.
Well, I'm sorry. Purchase price or loan amount,
or loan amount,
higher.
whichever is
higher.
Right. But that is the same no matter what title company you go to, right? They're all regulated. Where we vary is in our ancillary fees, which are things like a FedEx or a wire fee, which is in our case, we run lean, and we're looking just to recover that cost. We don't mark up a wire fee or a FedEx fee, anything like that. And then the other things like a recording of a deed or a mortgage, that's often thought about as a title fee. It's really not. It's just a cost of the transaction as well as transfer tax, which is a huge part of it. In
We pay
Philadelphia,
those fees, right? We pay
Right.
those fees to the county, the
right?
recording
Those,
fees.
right.
We
They
get
don't come to us.
nothing on
Right.
that. Actually, it costs us money to record.
Yeah, right. So, okay, that's helpful. And just wanted to underline that, there's no cost savings by going, like, if a title company is advertising, they can, do it cheaper. It's because they're doing something wrong, right?
Well, they may be doing it with, not charging you a wire fee or not
Right.
charging you a FedEx fee, which
Yeah.
technically is not allowed.
Yeah.
That could be considered like a kickback.
Yeah. And so here's my last question, then I'll move on to the attendee queue questions. But when a seller or a potential property, the person is telling you must use this title company, like they have their title company that the only way you can close on this deal is if you work with them. If what do you think the case might be in that situation? Is that just they have a relationship and want to use that, or is there something that you should be
Well,
aware of?
it could have been that they have worked on clearing issues.
Mhm.
A lot of times, like, the investors that I have a relationship with, I'll be clearing the title for them. So the buyer does have the right to choose their title company. I did all the work to clear that title. So the seller says, hey, use our title company or the title company, my title company, because they've already done work on it.
Right.
Gotcha.
But it is ultimately the buyer's choice. So as a
Right.
buyer, don't feel like you have to go, especially if your realtor is asking you to use their title company. Many real estate brokerages have in-house title companies that are wonderful title companies, not as wonderful as H&H, but wonderful nonetheless. But they may have some sort of ownership, and they are supposed to disclose that if that is the case. But ultimately it is yours. So again, having a relationship, if you're an investor and then that is going to be buying and selling properties, one a year or more than one a year, it would be good to work with a really good title company and have that relationship like Nora has with her investor.
Got it. Next question here, or first question from the audience is from Shannon, and they say, what's your view on, and Nora, we talked about this earlier, what's your view on transactions with wholesalers and subject to transactions? So we don't need to go into details, but from a very high level, can you explain the complexity, at least, acknowledging that it would be more complex than a typical, property you're buying with a realtor? Is that to
So I'm interested, is Shannon a wholesaler or is she interested in purchasing from a wholesaler?
Yeah, let's assume purchasing from the wholesale perspective.
Okay. So, wholesaling is becoming very, very common in the purchasing of real estate. I am not afraid to work with a wholesaling transaction, but what you have to remember is that wholesaler is a middle person. So that wholesaler has contacted the seller and said, hey, I'm going to buy this property from you. And then before they actually get to the settlement, they market it and they get a buyer. So now the buyer is paying a higher price than what the wholesaler has paid to the seller. And this can be very concerning to us as a title company, because we certainly don't want the seller to come back later and feel that they were taken advantage of or something was hidden from them. And, Pennsylvania has recently passed legislation involving wholesale transactions. So before entering into a wholesale transaction, I suggest that you speak to a realtor, a lender, or title company that is familiar with that legislation, because you don't want to get caught up in a transaction where the seller can turn around and say, you know what, I'm not doing this because I was not guided or, disclosed in the proper way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
perfect.
that new legislation is all about transparency, which is what we were talking about before. Everyone has to understand in writing what the deal is across the board. And that wasn't a requirement before. So it's a good thing. And it went into effect in January of this year.
And
Right.
I certainly do not have anything against wholesale deals. A lot of people, they feel that, they're not nice transactions because they feel like that wholesaler is, taking advantage of that seller. But, a lot of times you have a seller that just says, hey, I want to get rid of this property. I don't care how much money you make on it. I just
Yeah.
want what I want. And,
Sure.
but again, the wholesaler is also making his money with your money.
Yes, yeah. I was about to say that, Nora, that from the lender's perspective, right? They're taking a chunk of your potential profits. If
Absolutely.
you could
They're
have got
putting up no money to purchase that property. They're
right,
just entering into a contract with this person saying, hey, I'm going to buy this property from you. But if I, before we get to settlement, I might have it sold to somebody else. And
right.
then you're that person paying the money. I've paid no money as that wholesaler.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on that is, and this always comes up, because it's becoming more regulated. I feel like it's becoming more common in investor
Absolutely.
transactions. So, just saying, from the whole, sometimes it does take, $10,000 of work to get that property under agreement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, you can look at it both ways, and I appreciate you indulging on that topic. We're gonna move on to. Okay, next question here from Daryl. And how's it going, Daryl? He says, clarification on sheriff sale properties. Did I understand correctly that you do not provide title insurance for sheriff sale purchases, but you do offer title searches?
Correct. We will not insure the transaction directly to you from the sheriff. That doesn't mean that after you purchase it, you can't obtain title insurance. It's just that in sheriff sales, we have no control over, number one, the recording of the deed and the disbursements of the monies. So we do not want to be involved in that. But before you purchase, I strongly suggest you get that title search.
Got it. And a follow-up question from him, slightly different. Will you provide both a title search and title insurance for vacant land?
Yeah, I'm not afraid to take on anything. Um, there's a lot of title companies out there or title agencies that will say, no, we don't do wholesale, and no, we will not do vacant land, and no, we won't insure properties under a certain amount of money because, they feel like the lower priced properties are problematic. But again, I will look at what our search discloses and I will say whether or not I will insure that vacant land.
Great. This question might lead to a long discussion, so try and keep your answer brief.
Okay.
But Keith is asking about, have you dealt with PWD water payoff statement issues?
Oh, yes, I have.
With an abandoned house sale and no connected plumbing, they forced a new meter to be installed in order to provide the back estimated amount that delayed closing. How could a new meter help to estimate the back amount? It doesn't make any sense. So I'll just quickly say this is a more and more common issue popping up with Jumpstart properties,
Yep.
particularly PHA owned properties.
Okay.
Where either they sell the property and then a year down the line the new owner gets a water bill for $10,000 and sets off this chain of chaos. So what is your advice, I guess, for somebody who's encountered with that situation?
So here's the thing. The water department, they charge you for a service and they also charge you for usage. The usage is based, and I'm going to try to keep this brief because I could go on forever with this one. The usage is based on what that meter registers. There are many properties in Philadelphia that either do not have a water meter in the property and the water is connected illegally, or there's vacant properties, that have no meters in them because people go in and they steal these meters for copper. They're copper, people are going to steal them. But the city says, hey, we have the right to back bill for that usage. If we determine that water was being used in that property, we're going to back bill. My experience, and it's not a guarantee that this is what the city does, but my experience is if you are purchasing a property that is vacant and does not have a meter, you want that seller to get a meter installed before settlement. And the city says we have the right to wait for 3 cycle billings before we determine if we're going to back bill. So what they do is they put the meter in the property. If they go out there and they read the meter for 3 months and see there's been no usage on that meter, they're not going to back bill. If they enter a property and they see, it's not habitable, they're not going to back bill for usage. But if you do the rehab to the property and then you install this meter, and you're using the water as you're rehabbing, and then you get them to come out and read it, they're going to back bill. They're going to say there was usage in here. Or if they walk into a property and they say, we can tell people are living in here, but the meter's not connected, they're back billing. So you don't want to purchase the property without having the seller put a large amount of money in escrow. And, you can never really determine what they're going to back bill, but they can't, I look at it as, okay, what's an average water bill for a family of, 4 or 5? And that's how we determine our escrow for back billing. But this is a very big delay in settlement, because the first thing, the seller doesn't want their money held in escrow.
Yeah. Got it. That was a great explanation. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Next one comes from Tambora. How's it going, Tambora? She says, if someone has a deed to a home from the city of Philadelphia and the previous owners are a family who is deceased, how do you go about getting the title to the home if you have a current deed and are caught up on the taxes? So this might be a situation where they can reach out to you and kind of go over the specifics. But
Because I'm not sure how they have title to a deed, or the city has title to a deed. I'm confused with that
yeah,
question.
Tambora, if you're able to provide some clarification, or reach out to Nora and Michele afterwards. Daniel, how's it going, Daniel? He says he's a former Jumpstart graduate. Yes, he is. And he says, as far as clearing a title, is your company wholesaler friendly, where you bring a buyer and seller together? So yes, Nora will take on anything, but be aware it is complex. Question here comes from Sharif. He said, my grandfather died and my aunt is the only surviving heir. Can she sell me the property? How do we get this done without a lawyer? So Sharif, you might not need a lawyer at all. Might be able to just prepare an agreement of sale and work with the title company to transfer the property. Nora, do you have any suggestions for somebody who?
I do.
Okay.
So if it is your grandfather and your aunt is the only heir, which your aunt has, and your grandfather died without a will, your aunt has to go down to the Register of Wills office and open an estate. Before you go down there, I would call them, find out what information you need to provide to them to open that estate. And then she, as the representative of that estate, can then sell that property to you. But get a title search and get title insurance, because just because it was your grandfather's property that has been in the, in his name for a number of years does not mean there's not title issues.
Right.
And inheritance tax will be one of them.
Right. Got it. Last question here, and then we'll wrap things up. Comes from Robert. He says, how do you settle a lien from a company that no longer exists?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure that gets complicated and confusing, but if you could tell us maybe a story about that. Yeah.
So if it's a company that was a registered company, obviously, there is the Corporation Bureau, and they are usually registered as to who took over that company. I can tell you from my experiences, most of your consumer discount companies and lending institutions have been taken over by Wells Fargo. And so again, I think I touched on this a little bit. You have to reach out to, the person that is registered as taken over that company and ask them for a satisfaction. It can sometimes take a lot of research. And especially if it's an individual that is holding the mortgage and you can't find them.
Got it. All right. Well, that concludes our JUMPinar tonight. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Nora and Michele, I thought that was a fantastic presentation and great job answering all our questions. I'm sure our attendees will send you plenty of questions afterwards. And if you didn't get their emails from their great background there, I'll send out I'll send out the presentation along with your contact information so people can get in touch. But we really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Real quick before I go, I'm gonna just plug our next JUMPinar, which is in person at the office. It's coming up on April 2nd, another Wednesday at 7 p.m. And this is actually, it's not really a JUMPinar. It's more so a new style of event we're doing called Deal or No Deal with Joseph Scarice, who is a hard money lender broker working with Lendmark. So thanks first to Lendmark for sponsoring and Joe for hosting. And we're going to analyze some DSCR, buy and hold loan scenarios, and talk about how an underwriter is looking at those deals, what you should prepare for a loan underwriting, and going through that process of shopping around your refinance deal. So please do join us, and we'd love to see you there in person at 4701 Germantown, and that's April 2nd at 7 p.m. And then also just a reminder, we have all our recordings of our past JUMPinars at jumpstartgermantown.com. So be sure to go there. You can see our YouTube recordings. Those are all our Zoom JUMPinars that we've had videos for, and then also the audio only versions that are available as podcasts. So yeah, that's all I got. Thanks so much, Michele and Nora. Have a good
You're
night.
welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good night.
Good night.